Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, my name is Nastya Mashoshyna. This here is me. Okay, like that? I'm front-end developer at Levi9 and a mentor at Cotans. And this here is my very first public talk ever. I'm pretty nervous, so I promise it's gonna be quick. Typings. So the story goes like that. A few months ago, I have started my first project with React and Typescript. As for Typescript, previously I had experience of supporting an existing Angular 4 project, but the project was rather old and written before I joined. So as for starting a new project from scratch, this was definitely a very new experience. I was preparing myself by reading the documentation, by going through some egghead courses and lots of articles. And at some point, I realized that there was something that bothered me. I could find, the thing was that I could find really a lot of the how of TypeScript, but not the why of TypeScript. What I mean by that, that I could find any information about the setup of the project or the syntax quirks, but I couldn't find any explanation of why do I actually need this. Like, okay, I see. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, which is compiled, which allows you add types, which is compiled, and the compile time it checks for the errors. Okay, I see. It should allow me to minimize errors in my code. But how do I use it correctly to achieve this goal? So I went around asking my friends and colleagues. I would like to use this opportunity to thank to my team at Levi9 because they probably hate the word interfaces and will hate it ever since because I really I asked them really a lot. Okay, so in this talk, I would like to summarize some of my findings or some of the things that I wish I had been told a few months ago. This talk is clearly targeted at developers who either are only starting working with TypeScript or who haven't yet started but are interested in it. So if you are a seasoned TypeScript developer, you're probably going to be bored for the next 10 minutes. I'm sorry about that. Anyways, the first thing that I discovered was actually that to write, yeah, to write not that. To write proper TypeScript, you actually need to shift your mindset a bit. Namely, you should start focusing, TypeScript is all about interfaces. So you need to start by developing and deciding and designing the interfaces between your code entities, and only then starting the implementation. This approach is rather usual for the developers of in languages such as Java or C#, but probably not so usual for JavaScript developers. However, I think that was a very valuable experience for me, and I certainly can recommend it to anyone. Also, TypeScript provides you with a nice set of tools to do so. You don't need to to scratch something on paper. You have interfaces which you can use and see a documentation of your code appear just when you write it. The next thing I realized was that TypeScript is, writing with TypeScript is not about describing the inputs and outputs of your functions. Because my first, at the very beginning, my first impulse was really like, okay, I need to describe every input and output, and that will be okay. Not exactly. What you need to do is to build your own typing system of your application, which in ideal world should actually reflect your domain. Yeah, but most importantly, this should be a system which is tightly connected. The reason for that is that actually the most important thing of in my opinion, the most important thing that you should keep in mind is that you should avoid holes in your typing system. A hole in your typing system is a place in your code where TypeScript, for some reason, loses typing information and allows you to do some mistakes. Your main goal is to keep this in mind and to help TypeScript to help you to avoid mistakes. By the way, thanks to my fellow mentor Ivan Titarenko, who put a lot of effort in explaining those things to me. Let's move on. The next thing was kind of aha moment for me. you probably know, if you heard something about types, you probably, TypeScript, you probably know about the Types project. It's a collection of community written typings for libraries not written in TypeScript. So you can import those types in your project, and TypeScript will be aware of what to expect of a certain library. What I wasn't aware at the beginning of was that actually you can import the interfaces directly in your code and extend your own types or interfaces from those provided by the libraries. There will be some code in the next slide, so brace yourselves. Let's take a super simple React component. It's a card which shows title. I don't know why you would need this, but anyway, you have a card with one property. You describe it. It has one property title. It's a string. But then, after some time, you decide that you need to add to this card the functionality of leading your user back to the previous page. Okay, this card will be then rendered by React router route inside the React router route component, and you expect it to have the usual props like location, history, and so on. But if you try to do this, TypeScript will yell at you because it actually at this point has no clue that there is this history prop. What can you do? The first impulse would be, okay, if TypeScript doesn't know about it, then let it know about it. We'll just describe it in the props of your component. But actually, the cool thing is that you don't need to do this because React Router DOM exports an interface called router component props, which you can use and extend your props from this provided interface. This way, your component TypeScript and your component knows that it has a history, location, and so on. Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to mention, generics. Generics are things that at first blew my mind completely, so I had to take some time to wrap my head around it. But trust me, well, actually, when you see something like this, like brackets inside brackets inside brackets, that may seem confusing, but I encourage you to take this time and to get used to using it, but because you really love it, and when you do, then you will try to then you will look for that in all the interfaces provided by the third-party libraries. So just to reiterate, the 3 things I would like you to retain from my a little hectic talk is try starting with interfaces and then start the implementation. Keep in mind that you need to, at any cost, you need to avoid holes in your typing system because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And check what types does your libraries that you use provide. I would also like to mention and provide link to this wonderful guide, a static typing guide by Piotr Kwitrek. It's a really, really long and really, really detailed example of how you can style your React Redux application with many different cases. Maybe you don't need it that detailed, but you certainly should take a look at it, and it's a good starter. That's it. Thank you very much.